Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Joel.
And one of our topics today is going to be about aliens because, gotta love it. Yeah. But so our first question today is, what is your favorite movie with aliens? There are lots to choose from. Allison and I were like, okay, what are some alien
I could think of one. I could think of E.T. And then Abby was like, oh, there's so many. I was like, name another.
Name another? I feel like 90% of the things I watch have aliens in them.
Yes.
There's
So
some kind of
then I
subplot.
hit the Google, and in fact, there are so many.
It's a whole thing, yeah.
Like Space Jam?
Oh my
Guys,
gosh.
with Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny.
Can you even say that as alien? Yes, I guess you
Yes,
can.
you
Cartoon
can.
aliens. Yes.
They're aliens.
Yeah.
They are. They're monstars.
They play a basketball match against invading aliens.
Okay, basketball match. You're in volleyball season right now, aren't you? To
I
call it a
really
basketball
am.
match.
I really
I'll
am.
meet you up at the court for the match. Oh, that's awesome. But there's so many. Space Jam is a classic, though.
It really was.
First soundtrack I think I ever owned was the Space Jam
As
soundtrack.
it should be.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Space Jam.
So Space Jam, your choice?
That's your
or?
choice.
I mean, I don't have a favorite.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, because then I was also like, okay, well, Men in Black, the original, the OG, is a classic alien movie that I've watched so many times. You as well?
I think I've only seen Men in Black like one time. I don't know. I missed it when it was uber
Well,
popular.
yeah. Also, you're young and I'm old, and it came out in 1997.
Is
so,
it really 97? Wow.
How old were you?
I was 10.
Okay, so
And Abby wasn't even born, probably.
Yeah, I was one.
So yeah, but then also, and this is probably could be a deep cut, I don't know, but again, because you're young, the Coneheads movie. Did you ever see that? With
I've seen the
Dan
sketches
Aykroyd?
on SNL that led to the
Yes.
movie, but I
Yeah.
never actually have seen the movie. Dan Aykroyd, right?
Yeah. So I just remember watching that. I was probably a kid. I guess I don't know what year it came out, but it was so amusing back in the day, and so
Yeah.
those are probably the ones that I remember the most. I'm not big into scary sci-fi like movies.
Yeah,
That's not my jam.
No, but I feel like, again, this is like 90% of what I watch because I'm a geek from like all the comic book movies that have alien plots, like just the Guardians of the Galaxy, like half the characters are aliens.
Yes.
And then Star Wars is like my favorite saga of all time. And I'm like, well, that's all aliens, right? But I think back, there's a couple movies that strike me and just like core memories for me. One was probably Independence Day.
Yeah.
As like that was like a disaster movie and an alien invasion movie. Will Smith.
It feels very
Jeff
Men in
Goldblum.
Black. Is that because it's
It
Will
was
Smith?
more
But it
scary.
feels
Yeah,
like
maybe,
this-
'cause
it
he's in a
feels
lot of
very
that.
the same.
But it was a thriller in some ways, and like there's just moments from that movie that just strike me, and like I can still quote big parts of that movie. Welcome to Earth. I could have been at a cookout. Like all these different kind of things. Love it so much. But it was also like one of the very first PG-13 rated movies I ever saw. So it was like, wow,
risque.
this is risque here. But then another one when I was in like middle school was the M. Night Shyamalan movie Signs.
That's
Yes,
my
that's
choice.
Abby's.
That's your choice?
Yeah.
That movie, like, it marked me because it was like scary but redemptive and like this really cool story throughout it. And you don't see the alien until like an hour and 20 minutes into the movie, and then it is terrifying after you see it.
The scene where they're watching the footage,
video, yes.
and the alien walks by at the kid's birthday party, scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. Like that was terrifying.
And I could not look at cornfields the same way after that
yeah.
movie. It's an excellent film. It is so good, and I can go back to it from time to time too. I love it.
I love anything M. Night Shyamalan does.
yeah.
But
But for the record, Abby and I were in our office, and we knew with 1,000% certainty that you were going to say Guardians of the Galaxy and Star Wars when we were talking about alien movies.
Yeah, those are like, but they're more than just a movie to me. Like, especially Star Wars. It's like a part of my my
Identity.
DNA
Yeah.
as an identity at this point. So it's hard to like, because you can't pick one Star Wars movie. So it's
Yeah,
one of those
that's
things.
true.
But I love it though. Yeah, love those stories.
yeah.
So Signs for you, Abby. Any others?
Signs is my big one. Yeah, I can't really think of any other because
See?
I've never been someone who is really into like alien movies, and so I didn't watch a whole lot until Lucas and I got together because he's big into aliens, and so he like I swear every few weeks we're watching a new alien movie, and yeah, so he had me watch Aliens,
Dude,
a few months
Yeah.
ago, and that was really good.
Aliens
but-
is a great movie.
Yeah.
It's better. It's the
classic.
sequel to the original Alien, but it's got some scary stuff in it.
yeah,
Like, it's
yeah.
good.
But no, I just never grew up watching a whole lot, so Signs was
So
one
sheltered.
that stuck out to me. Yeah, yeah. So our first topic today is a CNN article by Ashley Strickland. It's titled "NASA Team Studying Unidentified Phenomena Shares Preliminary Update." A team of 16 experts and scientists assembled by NASA aims to publish its first report on unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAPs, also known as unidentified flying objects or UFOs, by the end of July. The team is going through footage and evidence of UAPs to determine how to evaluate and study these UAPs using data and technology. We roughly get anywhere from 50 to 100-ish new reports a month, said Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick of the U.S. Department of Defense. Of those reports, only 2 to 5% are truly unidentifiable by the team. The space agency has already noted that the limited number of observations of UAPs has made it difficult to draw scientific conclusions about the nature of such events. This report will inform NASA on what possible data could be collected in the future to shed light on the nature and origin of UAP, according to the agency. The 9-month study began on October 24, 2022, and the team will publish a report by the end of July. There have been several studies of UAPs carried out by various arms of the U.S. government, including a Pentagon report that was declassified in June of 2021. Though none have given the public a clear answer about what the UAPs could be. The intent of the study is to make a proposal for a research program that can be implemented once the researchers assess the data that exists and should be reviewed. So what do you guys think about all this? Are you hoping that something comes out in this report, or, what are your thoughts about this whole situation? Joel, you're the one that sent this to me, so I'll let you start it.
It's fascinating. I kind of vacillate between some kind of anxiety and some kind of skepticism, and then wondering about the whole thing, right? Because there's just a lot of implications inside of this. Honestly, there's a part of me that just probably believes that there's really not anything to this, and this might be something that will silence some of the people more on the fringes, just because I'm of the belief that humans are just not good at keeping big secrets, and like for something to be hidden for this long, and just doesn't make a ton of sense to me, because someone's going to blab about it, or anything like that. But so I hope there's some truth that could come out inside of this, but who knows? I mean, it's going to lead to lots of interesting questions and implications if there are things that we just can't identify. But there's just so many levels that we would have to go to get to the movie scenario, that we're just so far away from. I mean, so many of these things could be, or these UAPs or UFOs could be things from other countries. And I mean, we already saw like the weather balloons, the spy balloons and stuff this last year as well. So it could be stuff like that. It could be stuff we just don't understand. It could be somebody with a drone that they're messing with, you know what I mean? Yeah, dropping stuff, like as much as drones are popular now too. So I don't really know, but I am curious. I'm curious and trying to walk towards it with an open mind and be like, okay, let's be, if Christians are supposed to be people of truth, let's figure out what the truth is and sort of work with it as it gets there. But we will see in July. We got to do a follow-up, episode when this thing actually comes out, and we sort of see what this report that they've been collecting, what it's actually going to say near the end of the summer.
I love that this doctor, this random side note, said 50 to 100-ish.
Yep.
Because I'm like, I say ish too. So I'm like, well, that makes me scientific.
Yep.
But also, NASA's budget, I guess I didn't realize this too, is like over $30 million. And so I'm like, that is a lot of money. Like, I'm sure they're doing amazing work. I have no idea what all they do at NASA. Couldn't even begin to probably guess.
They have a PR problem by not letting people know what they're doing.
Yeah. But I'm like, is this worth investing a lot of, dollars on? I don't know.
Let's correct that. Sorry, but it's $30 billion. I think you said
billion.
million.
Did I say million?
Yes.
Yeah,
billion.
$30 billion. So that's even
more absurd.
I was going to say 30 million. That doesn't seem too outrageous.
No, 30 billion. So sorry.
No.
But yeah, so I'm like, I don't know what you're doing with it, which, okay, that's fine. You don't have to tell me, I guess. But also, if it involves aliens, I don't know. I'm like,
but if they're going to do this to defend our Earth against aliens, then it's like give them $60 billion. I don't really know.
Start a NASA army.
That's probably
that's what Space Force is here for.
Space
Yeah,
Force is happening, right? Yeah.
I'm here for it. But.
So yeah, we'll see. It's interesting because I mean, you don't want to walk towards it with panic. You don't want to walk towards it with being obsessed and thinking about it. But if there is life beyond Earth, then we should be able to celebrate all life that God chooses to create and walk towards it with curiosity and not fear, and sort of walking towards what this all could look like. But if all truth is God's truth, and God's character is consistent, then we can carry that into this conversation as well. And if we're supposed to be ambassadors of Christ and we're supposed to be people that represent God, then we should carry forth that heart and that characteristic towards whatever this looks like, instead of being fearful or doomsday scenario kind of things. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm just curious, out of all the alien archetype, like what they look like, what are they actually going to look like, right?
They probably look like us.
Yeah.
You probably don't even know.
But like one strange thing.
Maybe you're an alien.
Their nose is on like the back of their head or something. Like there'd be like one strange thing.
Yeah.
Something to set them apart.
Yeah, right. It'd be something weird like that, but we will see.
Yeah. I mean, there was that very recent alien report that I sent you guys where in Las Vegas there were several people that saw something falling from the sky, and then the people whose yard it fell in claimed that they saw these 8 to 10 foot tall green figures in their backyard with big eyes and stuff. But the way that they were describing them, they describe them exactly how we picture them, like in movies and stuff. And so it makes me wonder, I'm like, do you think aliens, if they're showing up, they're going to actually look like what we think they've looked like for so long?
And my thing is, dude, if aliens are actually going to show up, are they going to literally show up in Las Vegas? Like the place where it's all show business and like, all the like glitz and glamour.
Because maybe they're just trying to blend in. They're like, this place is a little abnormal. We're a little abnormal. Let's do this.
I mean, if I saw an alien walking down the street in Las Vegas, I wouldn't think twice.
Nope, you'd be like, yep, that's on brand.
Just a performer. Yep.
On break. Yep. On break.
So our next topic today, this is a Bored Panda article titled...
Hard-hitting news, Bored Panda.
Yeah, Bored Panda, yeah. It says, learn the history behind these commonly used phrases. There's 66 in this article. We're only going to go over a couple of them. It says there's plenty of common phrases we use or hear frequently that we probably don't know the origin of. This article looks at the meaning behind lots of these phrases. The first phrase I looked at was riding shotgun. It's a phrase used to claim the right to sit in the front passenger seat of a vehicle. This expression refers to the passenger of an old-fashioned stagecoach who sat next to the driver with a shotgun to protect from attackers and robbers along the way. The next one is show your true colors. It means to reveal one's real character or intentions, especially when these are disreputable or dishonorable. The origin comes from warships who would confuse their enemies by using multiple flags. However, warfare rules dictated that the ships must show its actual flag before firing, and hence the ships would then display its true colors. And then another one is close but no cigar, which means almost but not quite successful. In the late 19th century, carnival games were targeted to adults and not children, so the winners would get a cigar as a prize instead of stuffed animals.
The good old days.
Yes. If the person was close to winning but did not succeed, they'd say it was close but no cigar. So what did you guys think of these? Like, what one stood out to you the most?
Oh, man. I love all this kind of weird stuff because I feel like we do say a lot of things and we just don't even know why we say it.
Yeah.
We've just always said it or heard somebody say it. Mm-hmm. But one on the list was about waking up on the wrong side of the bed, which I was like, I don't even know what that means, you know, but I have heard people say that because, you're grumpy. Right. But it said that not only waking up on the wrong side of the bed, but some countries say like waking up with the wrong foot on the floor, which is still the left side or the left foot, I guess. So much that they would push the bed up against the wall. So like when guests got out of the bed, they could only get out on the right side. I'm like, that's deep. Our bed's kind of in the middle of a wall, so like, you know, both of us can get out on either side.
The left foot and the left side of the bed is the devil's foot and the devil's side of the bed. So that's just, that's not real. That's not real.
Where in the Bible does it say that?
No. I was like, I missed that.
On today's episode of The Bible Doesn't Say That.
Yeah. So apparently the left side, if you sleep on it, is the wrong side, just so you know.
Okay.
I love the phrase caught red-handed. We think it's when, you know, you've been discovered doing something or just after doing something wrong or illegal, but the origin actually shows that there was this old law stating that if someone butchered an animal that was not theirs, they would be punished because they had blood on their hands. So it's actually caught red-handed goes back to like gross. Blood on your hands and butchering somebody else's animal. And I'm going to think twice the next time I say that for sure. But it's just so funny to think like every culture has these turns of phrases, these idioms that we just lose the meaning along the way, or often the meaning morphs and changes and evolves along the way. There's so many of these in the scriptures too, especially in the Gospels. Jesus is teaching, and he'll use like a catchphrase or an idiom, a figure of speech that would have been very obvious to that audience there, but to us it sounds so weird and cryptic. This is why good Bible study matters, because it helps us understand things. But it's the same thing. Culture and words are always moving, and phrases are always changing. Like people around the church and our staff team give me grief because I don't understand the way that Gen Z talks at all. Like there's all these phrases and things that I'm still learning, like to be gas is good. Oh, that's gas. But I said the gas. And they're like, no, that's not how that works. And like, I'm like learning all these things. So I'm always just going to be in the wrong generation trying to understand these phrases. But it's just fascinating to hear stories behind these things. It is to me, at least. Yeah.
The one that really stuck out to me was steal one's thunder, you know, to take credit for someone else's work. It was like literal. So it says playwright John Dennis back in the 18th century made a machine that could nicely mimic the sound of thunder for his play. Sadly, his play wasn't a success, but somebody had taken note of his clever invention. When later on in another theater, Dennis found somebody had copied his thunder machine and was using it without credit, he got mad. Really mad. Somebody had stolen his thunder.
I know. I thought that was fascinating. I had no idea.
I would have thought that went back to like Norse mythology or something. Not at all. Nothing to do with Thor. No.
Nope. Literal thunder machines.
Yeah.
So does reading through these things make you more self-conscious when you use these common phrases that don't really make sense?
I hadn't really thought about that too much until recently. Like we were in the office and one of our coworkers said something had been grandfathered in. I just thought that was like everybody's grandfather, you know, like it was an old thing, like because something was so old or whatever, like it was just naturally included. But we found out like that was not actually the case. It came about during the 19th century when there were laws about regulating voting that ultimately discriminated against African Americans. And so it has like this racist undertone to being grandfathered in. And I had no idea. I literally just thought we all got old grandparents, you know, like it was just but no, it has racist undertones. So now like I do find myself kind of checking myself a little bit, like when I'm about to say something that seems weird, you know, because I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Did you know that about grandfather?
No, I did not.
Yeah.
That just opens up lots of different doors in my head of, you know, there's just all these phrases, like, you know, you remember hearing about like lullabies and how if you actually look at the lyrics of lullabies, they're like dark and twisted and scary. And there's like all these phrases that we can, in a benign sense, say today, like the grandfathered in kind of thing, and not know that that's the undertones. And so is the speaking of those things wrong when we don't know them, or like, because that's not our intention and we don't know that? You know, it's like, it's all that kind of thing. And so it comes to like, well, will that offend somebody? Could that offend somebody? That's the question we should be asking. Will that hurt somebody or cause harm to somebody? And it, you know, I don't know. It's those are the questions leading to it. But I didn't know, because I would just, I don't think I would think too carefully about so many of these things. I would probably just like, it might just be my personality, but I'll be like, oh, I learned about that later. Well, now I'm not going to say that anymore.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the thing. Like, once you know better, you do better.
There
but
it is. There it is.
Until you know, like, your intent is not to be malicious. But
but it's hard though, because words are always changing and things that, I mean, like, I remember specifically growing up and being like younger elementary school, and in our house, we were not allowed to say the F word. And the F word was fart. And it was like, and all my friends were saying, and it was like the most common word for a 7-year-old boy to say ever, right? And now, you move past that and you think like, wow, that word is a very benign word. Yeah. And there's other words that come to your mind when I say the F word, right? So it's just this interesting moving target. And so, again, whenever we talk about language and words and phrases, I think the Christ-like way to look at it is, how does this affect somebody else? Not just, can I say it? Yeah, you can say it, but does this affect somebody else? Does this perpetuate something that's harmful to somebody else? Like, those are the questions we should be asking about our words, instead of, is this the list of 4-letter words? Is this the words you can't say on broadcast television? That's not helpful conversations. But yeah, it will help me think differently about these phrases and just be curious about the way that these words and phrases come to be, instead of just owning them and not thinking about what they could mean or what they did mean. I think that's an interesting place to be. Yeah.
And when I get to thinking about it too much, I start to feel bad for people who English isn't their first language. Yeah. Like, this is so confusing if you don't understand. Because like, we just say these phrases. We don't know where they originated from, and we just assume everyone else knows what we're saying. But some of them are really confusing and do not mean what you might think they mean if you're not, if you didn't grow up speaking English. Yep.
And it's the same with slang too. Like, if you think, if you're learning English and somebody tells you about the word sick and you're like, oh, they're ill or whatever, and you're like, no, sick can also be cool or whatever. And you're like, what? This doesn't make any sense at all.
Sick is gas. Right? No.
Joel is mid right now.
There it is. So embarrassing.
So our final topic today is about the new Amazon Prime documentary, Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets. This is by Julia Willoughby and Olivia Christ. Shiny Happy People dives into the Duggar family stars of the show 19 Kids and Counting. It explores not only the family, but the religion they were a part of, the Institute of Basic Life Principles, IBLP. It includes interviews from Jill Duggar Dillard, the second oldest Duggar girl, her husband Derek Dillard, their cousin Amy King, and several individuals who have left the IBLP religion. The documentary explores many different topics. It talks about the sexual abuse from Josh Duggar and how Jim Bob and Michelle attempted to hide it, as well as sexual abuse within IBLP and how many young women were groomed to accept what happened to them as normal. It talked more about how Jim Bob was the only one being paid by TLC for the TV show, and he refused to pay his adult children that were forced to continue being on the show after even moving out. They also spent time talking about the homeschool curriculum from IBLP called Advanced Training Institute. This curriculum is based on the Sermon on the Mount. Homework questions include things like, how can graphs help to visualize the consequences of lust? How do prime numbers illustrate the principle of one flesh in marriage? And how did true mourning result in revivals in colonial America? Another topic talked about frequently within ATI and IBLP is the umbrella of authority. This stated that God is authority over everyone, and it trickled down to fathers being over mothers and mothers being over children. The IBLP website says God-given authorities can be considered umbrellas of protection. By honoring and submitting to authorities, you will receive the privileges of their protection, direction, and accountability. If you resist their instructions and move out from their jurisdictional care, you forfeit your place under their protection and face life's challenges and temptations on your own. So these are just a few of the topics that they touched on in the documentary. There was so much in there. So Allison, I know you watched the Duggars TV show. What about this documentary surprised you, knowing so much about the family already?
So unfortunately, I wouldn't say that a lot of it actually surprised me. I think what always drew me to it or fascinated me by it was because my mind just literally couldn't wrap itself around what was happening. Like, I just couldn't take my eyes off, because you knew that something wasn't quite right. You know, like I'd been around elementary age kids, teenagers, like they complain about doing chores, they fight with their siblings, you know, like all these things. And so to watch this and not see any of that, you're like, something's different here, you know. And not saying that if you have families where the kids get along all the time or they don't complain about their chores, that's wrong, because kudos to you. I wish that was my life. But, you know, so I think that's kind of what, same with like John and Kate Plus 8 was another show, or like Sister Wives, even like these different shows. Like, it's not, you're watching it, I feel like, because you know something is different, you know, strange there. So unfortunately, I wouldn't say too much surprised me, but I wish that it had more. Yeah. But yeah. Did you ever watch it?
Yeah, I watched it a lot growing up, and I have 8 siblings, so my mom constantly would like not really compare us to them, but would be like, look how good these kids behave. Why can't you get along with your siblings like that? And so I think what stuck out to me about the documentary, they talked about how they started physical discipline from when they were babies. Yeah, they did this thing called blanket training.
Dude,
where they
so dark.
Yeah, it's disgusting. They'd put a baby on a blanket, put a toy just outside of the blanket, and if the baby started to reach for it, they'd smack them.
Yeah.
Which is like developmentally, like just so destructive and just jacked up in so many different ways.
And so it makes me glad that I wasn't like them, because knowing that they were like this, because they knew they would get physically disciplined if they didn't obey stupid things like that, where, you know, you're reaching for a toy, you're a baby. Like that's what babies are going to do. But
yeah, there was an interesting line. I think it was the cousin speaking once, of saying like, you saw how these kids were and how they behaved, but nobody really asked the question, what did you have to do to get them there? And that was where the dark side of it really came from, because in so many ways their wills were broken. And man, and I can't wrap my head around that being a completely healthy way to, I'm trying to be as generous as possible, raise and discipline kids, like to break their will. Don't you want to like guide and shepherd their will and help like lead them? You know, there's just like so much that's so destructive inside of this way of mixing faith and family and together, because it's so much of it is power and dominance and such a focus on authority and who's in charge and who's supposed to be under the authority of another person. It's just such a distortion of the way I understand the New Testament, the way of Jesus, and what God's doing in the world. It just blows my mind how it can be so mixed in with religion as well, and sad to me. But I mean, I had never watched the Duggars thing, and so like just watching this, I was like doubly shocked, because you get the shock of like what the show actually showed, and then you get to see beneath the surface what was really going on. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, did nobody see this coming? Like, did nobody like ask the questions then, or were we all just kind of like watching the tragedy porn of it and just being like, oh my gosh, this is so jacked up, and we couldn't turn away from the car wreck. And then just to consider like real people and kids and family relationships that have all been tainted because of it. I mean, it was really shocking to me. And I honestly watched it in like the course of 24 hours, because I couldn't stop watching. Like, because, you know, I'm just really drawn to stories of religious trauma and trying to tell a better story. And this one laid it out pretty clear.
Yeah. Well, and it's been interesting, like, since the show stopped, I follow 3 of the daughters on Instagram.
So they have Instagram now. They have like social
well, they've
media.
left.
So
these 3.
So there are multiple kids that have like left the family.
Well, or moved out. Like some of them still have relationship with the family, but are out on their own. Like they're married, have their own kids. Some of them don't have relationship with the family anymore at all. And, you know, one of the documentary talks to Jill a lot. And I was surprised. I guess one thing that did surprise me was that Ginger, which is another one of the daughters, wasn't in the documentary at all, because she her and Jill have both recently put out books basically just spelling out their trauma, their life trauma, their church trauma, like what this has done for them as far as like deconstructing their faith and trying to figure out what they actually believe or find to be true versus what they were taught growing up. But I read another article that had Ginger talking in it, and she said that basically she wanted the book to like be her voice. Like this was everything that I wanted to say, and I didn't necessarily feel like I needed to. She also didn't want to worry about being edited in a bad light too, and so she's like, basically, this book is everything I have to say, but yes,
yeah,
I second what Jill said basically in a lot of the documentary. So yeah, there's there's a few of them that have found a different way, and then. Yeah, there's still several kids who are still living at home. So I don't know what this means for them. Like that's, again, I just think about all of how sad, all of it is. Because you look at those older kids and you're like, okay, they now have this opportunity to figure out life, but you still have at least 4 kids.
Well, you think about the layered trauma, too, of just they're child stars. Like they're celebrities who didn't get paid for it.
No.
And like now they're dealing with just the normal, any child actor, any child celebrity, reality star, like dealing with that thing. We've talked about celebrity on the podcast before too, and how that's just a crushing weight we weren't created to live with. Then you layer on the family dynamics that are all jacked and broken by abuse or abuse of power. And then the religious trauma on top of that, to where their view of God has to shift or morph, or they're staying in this kind of thing. Like it's just a truly like Shakespearean tragedy kind of thing. And I was just blown away by the whole thing. Abby, from your experience growing up in a large family
who homeschooled
as well, what were some of the things that were things triggering for you? Were they like, well, this is fascinating, or like what was that experience like for you? I mean, I'm sure there were tons of differences, but like, on the other side of it now, what was the experience watching that like?
I don't know if any of it was really triggering, but it was interesting seeing how some of their like rules that they followed and like their curriculum and stuff like that seemed to really apply to other homeschool families I knew growing up, because we were part of homeschool co-ops my whole life. So we were close with lots of other homeschool families, and I saw a lot of their values and stuff in these other homeschool families, where now that those kids are grown up, they're going through the same thing where they're deconstructing and they're trying to figure out what they believe. And so it's crazy seeing those parallels, because I mean, I watched the Duggars. I grew up around these people that had these same like beliefs and stuff, but I never connected the two because I didn't realize that's what was going on. And, I didn't know a lot of this stuff until I watched the documentary about like the IBLP and the Advanced Training Institute and things like that. And so learning more about that, I'm able to connect those pieces. Or like Joshua generation, I've heard of and know a few people who did try to go into government and politics and things like that. And I just thought, oh, that's just something they're interested in. But now looking at it, I'm like, is it part of that? Where the Joshua generation, for those who didn't watch the documentary, was basically telling families to raise their kids to go into the government so that they could essentially take over the government. Infiltrate the government and have majority. And so I kind of connect that too, and it's crazy.
You were around a lot of it, even if you weren't in it, which is fascinating to see. You were the rebel homeschool family. It's such an interesting thing, because when I try to learn from this, there are some elements to this thinking and worldview that has been very mainstreamed. A lot that everybody would scoff at or be like, "Oh, I can't believe that." But there are some elements to this that really you find the genesis of some of this thinking in this world that's now been mainstreamed. For example, the umbrella of authority. Like, I mean, I've seen that from people that are not in these kind of religious waters all over the place on social media, where it's, God's the umbrella over the Father, and the Father protects the mother, and the mother
that was a
takes care of the
huge thing
kids.
with
That's
a lot of
huge,
homeschool families.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, and it's, you know, the umbrellas there protect you from the devil's rain or whatever that is, which I don't know what the devil's rain is. But anyway, and I just think that, yeah, that's one way to interpret what's going on in the scriptures, but man, that is just not the only way to understand this. I mean, the way that my family understands like a family dynamic is more of a partnership and leading into like your giftedness and shared responsibility and respect and honor, mutual submission instead of wife, you submit to the husband and the husband submits to God and the kids submit to the wife. I mean, the mom and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's more of a mutual understanding of a posture of service that we want to carry and respect and honor, and not this top-down approach, which kind of feels militant and it's really bent on power. Which, man, you just see when people build systems around power, how quickly it is people get eaten alive by that desire for power and authority. It's just so jacked up. So there's that. But then also just when it comes to the political sphere, like the element that you were talking about, the Joshua generation was raising your kids to basically infiltrate the government so that we can get God's kingdom here, the way that God wants things to be run here. And, you know, in some ways, like I empathize with the end goal of like, we need to be people that usher in God's kingdom and partner with God in God's kingdom. But man, I just can't see it any differently than God's kingdom is not like this world. And God's kingdom doesn't come from force or power or sneaking around or infiltration and getting into positions of power. Like when God wanted to like start his kingdom movement, he sent Jesus. And did he send Jesus as like part of the emperor's family to like get close to the Caesar? No, he sent him to the backwaters of the Roman Empire, to a nobody family, into poverty. And then how did he like show what his kingdom looked like? He went to the least and the last and those who didn't have power. He didn't work his way up in a political system. So yeah, I believe that God's kingdom is coming, and I want to be a part of that arrival. But that kingdom comes through sacrifice and through gentleness and kindness and love. And this kingdom comes from losing, not winning. Like, that's how Jesus actually did the thing, was by losing and dying and giving up his life. And so, man, I'm just so struck by the allure of power. And if we just get the right guy in office, the right person in office, then God's going to get his way. And I get the allure of that, but that's not the story that is told through Jesus. It's a story that's upside down, and it looks like losing. And so, but I see that desire for, we need to get in there and get moral people in this. I see that desire. I just think that it comes a different way. I think that God's kingdom is upside down, and it's counterintuitive. And that's the kind of thing that I want to be a part of. And it breaks my heart seeing these thoughts that come from this very small sect of a conservative fundamentalist kind of thing, you know, sort of seep out to other streams of Christianity to where it can be mainstream. But man, I think there's a different way to tell the story. Yeah. God's kingdom comes through love and sacrifice and through kindness, and by losing, that is how things get done. And that's not easy, but man, that's just what Jesus was up to. Yeah. So, but yeah, this whole thing, it's pretty unbelievable. But it all happened, you know.
Yeah, no, it's just sad for the whole family, for the individual members of it, for those who were like impacted by the show. Because I'm sure even like you have production teams that, you know, watched a lot of stuff happen. And then, yeah, just for the church as a whole, because you have people who wouldn't probably call themselves Jesus followers, who are watching or seeing these things play out, or just seeing the hurt and the trauma, and you know, like, what does that mean for their, you know, belief, or them, you know, I don't know, coming to know Jesus for who we believe that he is. So, yeah, the whole thing for me is just, it's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah.
I would just say this, too, if, like, anybody's listening, because I have these conversations all the time with people that maybe they grew up in a stream or a tribe of Christianity that had some of these tendencies, and they kind of felt like they've lost their way. First, I just want to say, man, I'm so sorry that you've been harmed the way that you have. I mean, that breaks my heart. It breaks God's heart. Like, that's not what he's up to. So I'm so sorry that you've had to endure that and been harmed. But secondly, I just say that I would just invite you to trust that there's a different way to tell the story. There's a different way to understand the Bible, the person of Jesus, what God is up to in the world, that doesn't look restrictive and punitive and authority obsessed. Man, there's a different way. And I don't think it's something that we're inventing out of thin air. I think it's the original story. I think it's the way that Jesus actually came into the world. And man, I just encourage you to find a faith community where you can ask questions, where you're not going to get shunned or shut down, where you can take a good look at the person of Jesus. Because if you want to know what God is like, don't look at your church leader. Don't look at the person on stage. Don't look at YouTube and what's got the biggest Christian hits on YouTube. If you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. And I think you'll be surprised and just be intrigued and compelled by who he is and the story that he was telling in the world and what he's inviting people to do today. So don't give up on the Jesus thing, man. Take a look at Jesus first. And if you find yourself back into a church and a faith community, that's a beautiful thing that I think will be fulfilling. But take a look at Jesus and don't get caught up in all this other stuff.
Yeah. So I've heard some people say that this documentary is an attack on Christian values. So what do you guys think about that?
I didn't see it as an attack on Christian values. Yeah. I saw it as an attack on a twisted version of the Christian values and Christian stories. It's like every turn you could take on what the fruit of the Spirit looked like, this was not the fruit of the Spirit. Like this didn't produce patient, kind, graceful people. You know, it produced a lot of hurt and trauma and oppression. And I mean, we didn't even get into this, but the whole role of a woman inside of a family and inside of a culture, like it just doesn't, it's not an attack on Christian values. It's an attack on the shadow side or the opposite of Christian values in so many ways. And not saying that the people behind the documentary are Christians, but I think they're critiquing this the same way that Jesus was critiquing religion in the first century and saying, you guys think that you have this, but you're missing the most important things. You're twisting what this story is supposed to be from the very beginning. So no, I don't see that at all. And man, like, let's have some humility and to listen to stories of people that have actually been hurt instead of being so defensive, to be like, well, they're attacking our Christian values. Let's actually listen to people that have been hurt and like hear their stories and have some humility and own any part of it that we can own in it so that we can be better and grow. I don't have a lot of patience for that conversation. Of like, this is an attack on Christian values. You know, it's like an attack on Christian values, like when there's greed and people are being hurt and, you know what I mean?
And
like
victim shaming.
And people try to silence and shame victims. I'm like, that's an attack on Christian values. And so, I think let's sit and listen and learn and take our lashes where we have to so that we can grow. And that's all I've got to say.
I know. And I'm just sitting here thinking, my mom always said, if you don't have anything nice to say. But, you know, I just reiterate all that Joel said. It's just, I don't think that it's an attack on Christian values because I don't think that the way that they were, and maybe their intentions originally were good and true. And, but ultimately, like, that just wasn't the case. So. Yeah, I don't think we're talking about the same things when we're talking about Christian values, I guess.
And I encourage you, if you think that way about the documentary, I feel like a lot of people who have said that haven't actually sat down and watched it with an open mind. I think they've come into it with an opinion already about what it's going to look like. And so I encourage you to just watch it, have an open mind, and, you know, have empathy towards these people who have gone through all of this. And I think you'll probably see it a different way. Well, that is it for this episode of Atypical Talk. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to talk about, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Atypical Talk Pod, and make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.